Homer remains an enigmatic figure in literary history. Little is known about his life, and much of what is believed about him is based on legend and speculation. Scholars generally place him in the 8th century BCE, though some argue for an earlier or later date. Some sources describe him as a blind poet, a characterization immortalized in artistic depictions and literary references. Since Homer lived in an era when written records were scarce, much of what is known about his personal life is derived from later interpretations. Homer is one of the most significant figures in literary history, though much about his life and identity is shrouded in mystery. The epic poems The Iliad and the Odyssey have left an indelible mark on Western culture. Through tales of heroism, adventure, and human struggle, Homer's works continue to captivate readers and scholars alike. Whether viewed as a historical figure or a legendary symbol of oral tradition, his legacy endures, proving the timeless power of hero stories. In what era did Homer live? During the classical period, Greeks generally regarded the accounts in Homeric epics as historical facts and accepted Homer's existence. Herodotus, the father of Greek history, in his histories, placed Homer about 400 years before him, around 850 BC. Aristotle, however, believed Homer lived 140 years after the Trojan War, which, by this calculation, places the Trojan War around 1000 BC. Modern archaeological research suggests that Homeric epics could not have been written before the 8th century BC. Therefore, Homer's active period was between 700 BC and 850 BC. Where was Homer born? The question of Homer's birthplace has also been debated due to the lack of conclusive evidence. Various ancient cities, including Chios, Smyrna, and Colophon, claim to be his home. Traditionally, he is said to have been born in Ionia, a region on the western coast of Asia Minor, modern-day western Turkey's Aegean coast, which was home to a rich tradition of oral poetry. Its cultural legacy matches Homer's great epic, so that his birthplace is much less disputed than his historical period. Was Homer a real person? The ancient Greeks believed that Homer, a real historical figure, wrote both Homeric epics. However, a close analysis of the epics shows they were not composed in a single continuous process. Objects from different eras appear, sometimes bronze weapons, sometimes iron, indicating inconsistent dates of composition. Therefore, the stories were not written by a single person. Modern archaeology has further revealed grammatical errors and inconsistencies, suggesting that multiple editors compiled the Homeric epics. There is no evidence that Homer was a historical figure. The name likely stands for a group that finalized the epics. Is Homer blind? It's indeed a legend. There is no evidence that Homer is a real person, no way to judge him, blind or not. According to ancient accounts, he was a wandering bard who traveled from city to city, reciting his poetry in exchange for food and shelter. The idea of the blind poet is most famously depicted in the ancient Greek hymn, the Homeric hymn to Apollo, in which a speaker describes a blind man from Chios who sings beautifully. People prefer that he be blind because the ancient Greeks held that blind people's minds were more precise and more lucid than those of sighted people. Did Homer create the Homeric epics? We prefer to credit Homer with compiling the Homeric epics. Earlier poets created its stories. This view stems from the stylistic differences between the Iliad and the Odyssey. Furthermore, analysis of the textual structure indicates that a single author did not compose the Homeric epics. The earliest form of the story of the Trojan War was inseparable from oral tradition. The stories were passed down through generations of wandering poets, gradually taking their familiar form over centuries. In the oral age, the stories shouldn't have a unique author, Homer. When was the Homeric epics written? After being passed down orally for centuries, Greek bards familiar with the Trojan War legends began collecting and compiling these oral tales, which were then compiled into the Iliad and the Odyssey. Due to grammatical errors and inconsistencies, many people must have contributed to this work, yet the stories were uniformly attributed to Homer. Archaeologists have discovered Trojan horse motifs on artifacts dating back to 670 BC, indicating that by the early 7th century, the story of the Trojan horse was already widely circulated. Historians generally date the epics to around the end of 700 BC. 7 is the Trojan War history or a story. Homer recounts the Trojan War, but whether it actually occurred remains debated. The story contains inconsistencies. Could the Greek coalition have mobilized thousands of warships and 100,000 troops for a 10-year siege? If even the Roman Empire at its peak and 18th century European powers struggled to mobilize such numbers in a single campaign, the capabilities of the Greeks around 1000 BC seem highly questionable. Most importantly, not only is the Trojan War poorly attested archaeologically, but the city of Troy is as well. The Homeric epics are likely fictional. 8. What is the Homeric poetry? The Homeric poetry refers to the epic works attributed to the ancient Greek poet Homer, primarily the Iliad and the Odyssey. These foundational texts of Western literature detail heroic deeds, war, and divine intervention, and are characterized by oral tradition techniques such as dactylic hexameter and formulaic language. They were transmitted orally before being written down centuries later. They explore themes of honor, fate, and human-god relationships, forming the basis for Greek education and culture. They have influenced countless writers and thinkers throughout history, had an enduring impact on Western literature, and continue to be studied and revered today. 9. What is the Iliad? The Iliad is an epic poem that recounts the Trojan War, focusing on Achilles, the greatest Greek warrior. It opens with a quarrel between Achilles and Agamemnon, the leader of the Greek forces, and then follows the ensuing battles and personal conflicts. The story culminates in the death of Hector, the Trojan prince, and the grief of his father, King Priam. Although the war itself is not resolved in the poem, the Iliad offers a profound exploration of themes such as honor, fate, and the human condition. 10. What is the Odyssey? The Odyssey follows Odysseus, a Greek hero, as he attempts to return home after the fall of Troy. His journey is filled with trials, including encounters with mythical figures such as the Cyclops Polyphemus, the enchantress Circe, and the seductive sirens. Throughout his 10-year voyage, Odysseus relies on his intelligence and cunning to overcome obstacles. He ultimately returns to his homeland, Ithaca, to reclaim his throne and reunite with his wife, Penelope. The poem explores themes of perseverance, loyalty, and the power of human ingenuity.